so hard. So hard. I don't think it should have been. I think I took it a little personally, but it was hard. I spent 10 years building an aura of this exact person doing this exact thing. And my public persona that it infused into my true personhood was like very much associated with being this plucky little kid that was doing kitchenwares. So I did a couple things in emotional self-defense. I kept our team. Like, these kids are rad. Let's keep working together. What can we do? So I kept most of our team, but I was really motivated by people, and I didn't want this kind of win for me to be a loss for anyone else. Again, I don't know that that's the most quantitative or intellectual driver, or that I should have made it a linchpin in the whole thing. That certainly wouldn't have been the right business decision, but somehow for me, it was really important that, like, if I'm winning, everyone else needs to win.
She just sold her company. She sat in a room full of men negotiating the biggest deal of her lifetime. Wait, she sold for how much? I can't even believe she managed to get double her valuation. Let's keep this just between us.
Welcome, Sam, to the show.
Thank you.
I'm so
great to be here.
I'm so happy to have you here, and I can't wait to talk. I mean, you have done so many incredible things, but I'm so excited today to focus on gear, which I am pronouncing correctly. I'm very excited. I know we talked about this a little bit before the show, but like, you know, you have a thing for creating businesses with names that have to be like just checked before they go.
I mean, it's sort of unintentional, but it's now become a theme. I'm reconciling it though. Like I've learned my lesson. So gear came from get it right, but it was really like gear that gets it right, and that could have been kitchen gear or cycling gear. And I can talk about how that, you know, plan for doing other product lines really just like went to the Weiss head, and we focused on kitchen, but gear. And then Manifest, I founded a business that helps other people do that same sort of thing. The A became a V for reasons I could also explain. But now, endless, hologram, just straight lining it. I learned my lesson.
But Sam, maybe there's like a brilliance to it. I'm just thinking, like, when I said it, I was like, oh, so she's a genius. That's what I saw. Okay, but tell me,
we'll stop and be like, what?
What's this? I need to think about this for an extra second, and then I'll remember it. You see, you never know. Okay, so tell me about the start of gear. Tell me about how you started it.
Oh boy, this is such a fun one because it's so, like so many founder stories, just really came from the heart. I do not have an MBA. I have my business education literally on the streets of New York. I had this idea for a one-piece silicone spatula, and that idea came from this moment in the kitchen where my two-piece spatula broke, and I was like, this is stupid. Why don't you just make it out of one piece? Because the gunk hole inside most two-piece spatulas was like, what, this has been in my cookie batter the whole time? Like, that is so disgusting. And I'm a little bit of a neatnik, so I mean, it was being dishwashed, but it just was not getting clean. Well, yeah, why don't you just make this out of one piece? Like, let me just Google that. That's so obvious. It must just be here. And at the end of a Google search, which is how so many stories start, is I was looking for this. I couldn't find it on Google. I was just like, well, what if I just prototype it? And I'm kind of I'm a geek. I like to experiment. I've got some science background stuff and interests. And I was like, oh, I'm just going to buy some silicone off the internet and like put it together. So I put a chopstick inside of some silicone, and I made a one-piece silicone spatula out of a mold that I'd made from Sculpey. And that became sort of like the thing that launched 1,000 ships. And I could keep going, but that is like the very true start. It was just like this kitchen experiment.
That is the coolest and most like, it's both totally relatable because I could see like being in the kitchen and like having that moment. And then like, holy shit mode where you're like, oh, I'm actually going to just get some silicone and build this. Like that is unbelievable. So how did it become a thing? How does it then go from I'm in your kitchen and I've got a chopstick to a business that's sellable? Like how does this happen? Give me the trajectory.
A lot of sweat equity. So you have to interrupt me if I'm telling this into
We want to know. We want to know.
The Hester Street Fair on the Lower East Side. And like the first meeting with Target and Sur La Table and all the way up. But really, and this is an anecdote that sort of follows me around. So I make this prototype and I'm like, actually, this is pretty cool. I'm going to make some gifts for my family. Like, this is going to be my Christmas thing. And then I kind of like got checked out and I was like, I'm going to not kill grandma with silicone that I bought off the internet. Like, they're going to cook with this.
Right.
I should probably call factories and see if there's a way that I can do this. It's like non-toxic, food safe, and ultimately scalable, because as you know, like the word of mouth network was going and my friends knew that I was working on this, they were like, can I have one? Like, sure. So I started to call factories.
Okay.
Punchline. You cannot make 10. You can make 10,000.
Right.
And I was like, that's a lot. Spatulas. But crowdfunding was really hot at the time. And I was, kind of like a creative in New York and had lots of friends that were doing publishing campaigns and little projects of their own. And I was like, well, why don't we just put this on Kickstarter? That's how I could make 10,000. Like, let's see where it goes. So I put it on Kickstarter. I made like a sweet little video and got a few prototypes. And that became like viral. It was not that much money. It was a $50,000 campaign, but the word of mouth was just ridiculous. And I think I was very much benefiting from the tailwind of Kickstarter itself at the time. Like, Kickstarter campaigns were newsworthy in and of themselves. My thing happened to be novel. You put the two together, and like the editor of the New York Magazine gift guide is like, we're putting you on the cover. Whoa. Okay, there's like an earned media machine here. And I made this like really unpopular choice. My husband who's now my business partner and like total confidant and has been behind me for every minute. But I'm like, we need to make this in like 12 colors. He's like, that's stupid. Why would you make 12,000?
Right.
Well, because like this is just one product and it needs to have something. I need to make more out of my one little thing. So I made this rainbow, and I love rainbows. And I'm like, I love light and I love sparkles and anything that glows. And I was just like, it just needs to be a rainbow of color, despite the neutrality of my background. But everything's green.
I can see it though. I can envision this whole thing.
You can see it. I make this rainbow spatulas that adds to the virality of all. So it's like this silly little girl from New York is like completely breaking the financial rules that have governed this industry for years. Make it in black and make it in red and make it in green, and those were the kitchen colors, and we're done. And I just made a rainbow, and people liked the rainbow. So all of a sudden people liked like me and the storytelling, and they liked the product, and they liked the crowdfunding element, and they liked the rainbow, and they were like, Sam, make more. Like, okay, what's next? So I can pause there for a second, but that was like just a flywheel that started to happen, and the business just took off from underneath me, really.
Okay, so you're selling on Kickstarter, you get enough to make the prototypes, you get enough to make this first batch. How does it go from there to being everywhere?
So Williams-Sonoma calls. We're like, what's next? I was like, I don't know. That was really wrong.
They just called you on the phone.
They called me up. Yeah, it was people. I don't know how. This is a security risk. I don't know how people have my cell phone number.
Okay. Proud Sam.
I got cold calls from chefs and from stores, and they were asking what was next. And to be honest, like I was a kid with a project. I did not have a business articulate answer, but I am business minded and entrepreneurial, and I kind of like took that as a signal that I should do more in this space. So Kickstarter campaign number 2 and 3 and 4, all the way up to 9. And we just started building out everything that we thought would be a part of, a kitchen utensil lifestyle brand that would get it right. But it was bootstrapped. So the growth was like very methodical and slow in so many ways. We had this like great earned media and organic flywheel going, and a truly, I think, like spectacular ability to kind of churn out product. Makes it sound thoughtless, but like to produce quality material, quality products and designs, and be really thoughtful and fun about it. But I couldn't afford any advertising. So like all of my peers were like doing the direct to consumer thing, and their products and their bundles and whatever, their margins could justify performance marketing and paid advertising in a way that I was like, I cannot do that. I got to build like a community and a newsletter list and a big book of Wholesale. So then we hit the payment with Wholesale, and that really started to work. And that was like, I talk about this a lot on my podcast, like Wholesale was such a beautiful foundation for our business. It was just like the bread and butter of it all, because you can absorb, if you're in 10,000 doors, like you can absorb some churn in those customers, but like the monthly orders are pretty great, and you don't really have to continue to pay for customer acquisition. You're paying for it in wholesale margin, of course.
Right.
So that starts to chug along. Then I think we made a couple of we did some lucky things and some unlucky things. I started another brand. I had a little bit of a chip on my shoulder because this spatula was ripped off like really easily. Yeah, I have one here because I always have. This is my favorite color. But and it glows in the dark, which was like a particular obsession. I don't know why I made a spatula that glows in the dark. This is like, the dark. It glows in the dark. Right. It was so novel for like 30 seconds. And then everybody was doing it. So one year we made a huge splash at like all the trade shows. And the next year they were like, I'd have buyers come up and be like, what are your KSPs? What differentiates you?
Yeah.
And I was like, well, we started this shit. But it's no longer differentiated. And we had patents pending, but like, of course, they weren't issued yet. So people just ran all over it. And I thought, I'm gonna show them. I'm gonna do something that's like them. I'm gonna show the world that I can do something that is more technical and innovative than like just these sorts of things. Because I kind of felt some type of way about it being so simple. So we started a second brand. It's a freshness sensing coffee grinder that was battery operated, that had and I'm kind of like an espresso person, had my wish list of all of the things that I would want out of like a really, really great grinder. That was hard and expensive and bootstrapped and, wasted a lot of money doing that. We brought it to market, it was successful, but like not the commercially viable thing that I thought it might be.
Did you build it because you thought it couldn't be copied in the way that the silicone spatula could?
Yes. Yeah.
I mean, that was like, it was totally motivated by the fury that you were copying.
Revenge is a strong motivator. No, I shouldn't. Yeah, number one, I thought a bunch of things. I thought this is going to have higher gross margin dollar contribution than my cute little spatulas do. So like this will be a better business model for us. The espresso space was pretty hot, like coffee, third wave coffee, a really good thing. I had like a perspective on, and these patents are all issued. I have like a huge patent portfolio around not only the coffee grinder itself, but the mechanisms and algorithms through which we were able to identify the coffee bean freshness. We're like, okay, this is defensible. It's also tech that we can license to industrial coffee applications. The amount of waste in coffee making, and this is for another underscore it. It's extraordinary. So I'm like, okay, we're going to save industrial coffee makers money. We're going to save the planet from a bunch of coffee bean waste. We're going to have this like way better business model. And so that was like pumping alongside. But that's a good example of, and I could linger on it, like some challenging decisions that were made that eventually I had to kind of make a choice between like, okay, am I going to throw my energy in kind of making this more expensive thing come to life, but still bootstrap? Like each unit was $200 to manufacture it. That was just like a lot to foot. That was a big deal to foot. And then gear was doing so well. Right. So even though we'd gone down this little path, I'm like, okay, gear's doing really, really well. I got to put my energy here. And then there were some really good, very circumstantial, very tactical decisions that we made. One of which is sort of unimpeachable, and the other of which is like very interesting, but like a conversation. The first was to make silicone straws when the government was regulating straws. I'm like, okay, this is good for the planet and it's a consumer need. And like moments like that, you're like product market fit. The government is requiring this. It's very, very popular. It's doing a good thing.
Easier to bootstrap. Doesn't have to wash what the coffee maker costs. Wow.
Right. Okay. And then, back to silicone and back to this sort of simple material that is best in class. Yep. At silicone manufacturing. Really, I mean, I deeply understand silicone and its manufacturing methodologies and sort of like led the charge on a lot of it. So we do straws, and that just is like a huge kicker for the business and opens so many more doors, brings so much more social awareness to what we were doing as a brand, which is like, like with these simple products, trying to do something cool and good in the world. And so that was great tactical decision, number one. And great tactical decision number 2, which is a big conversation, is that when COVID hit, we made masks, silicone masks. And then also we were in housewares, and like housewares was so hot. So, but we didn't know it was going to be. We didn't know everyone was going to be stuck home making just
and sipping off of their reusable straw. Yes, for sure.
So when things started to shut down, we halted all production on utensils. That was a mistake because we just didn't know. We're like,
You wouldn't have been able to.
what's going to happen? Are we going to have to furlough everyone? We were a remote business, but we were shipping from our own warehouse. We didn't know whether or not we were going to be allowed in the warehouse. But since we were a shipping business, it was effectively like an essential service. And we were shipping for ourselves and others already, like kind of doing a service business inside our business. So we were allowed to continue shipping, and we were providing products that, oh my gosh, were so popular. But so the mask was really like, well, how do I keep my team engaged and busy, and how do we help? Because N95 masks were obviously about to be controlled, and it was a huge conversation. And we had, once we announced that we were going to try to do this, because our product design teams, we are really fast. So within 3 weeks, we were concept to market with masks for COVID. Again, product market fit. And we had no idea how deep the pandemic would go or how long it would last. But we just thought, well, if we can't sell spatulas, which was a miscalculation.
Correct. Right.
Why don't we do this other thing that's helpful? And because of our speed to market, we had masks when really remember people were like cutting up t-shirts to make masks? We had a mask in a package that was like under an emergency use authorization and, being sold. And that was really wild. It was hard for us to be together and kind of like so in crunch time. And a lot of other folks were like, they're taking 2 weeks off or 2 months off and spending their COVID bonuses. And we were like literally shipping 24/7 from our warehouse in Southern California every time a container came. And I was commuting I lived in Northern California at the time, and I was commuting to SoCal. And like every time a container would come, Brian and I would run multi 24-hour shifts to get it all out the door because people were panicked. And when we were late, that was like really not cool. Yeah, that product. But people didn't know, supply chain is popular now, but no one knew what it was.
No, that's true. Nobody had a clue what supply chain was before COVID. So you're selling masks, and I assume eventually you realize that people are cooking at home, need all of your stuff at home. You start growing. At what point do the sale discussions happen? And Sam, I want to know if early on you thought about exit. Like, did you have an exit plan? How did this come to be? And tell me about the start of the exit conversation.
I didn't have a plan, but I do, in retrospect, I would recommend to anyone who's going to start a business, especially with their own money, especially bootstrap, like have an exit plan in mind. Kind of get smart on that. This was a product that was a project. There was a Kickstarter thing that just happened to beautifully, wonderfully work and was a good founder product fit for me. Like I can do this brand really, really well. And I'm technical in a lot of other ways that allowed our business to scale. Like we were building, an ERP, which is now Endless Commerce. That was like the backbone of that allowed us to be in so many different stores with bundles and SKUs and proper inventory reservations. But I didn't start knowing any of that was going to be the requirement. And here's like, I'll more directly answer your question in a sec, but a lot of founders identify as founders because they have an expertise in product and an expertise in storytelling. And many of my founder friends and folks that I advise, like that's a through line. You're a good founder or at least very good at the very beginning starting stages of a business, not necessarily scaling a business to retail scale, but if you're good at product and you're good at storytelling. And so many people start there, and what they don't realize is that the job of the founder becomes, as you start to scale, it's plumbing. We're plumbers. We're picking point solutions for the different widgets that we need to make the business run. We're connecting them on the back end. We're entering API keys. We're plumbers. And I'm like a good plumber. So like that really worked for me. But I did not realize that was going to be a requirement. I just happened to be a good plumber. What I thought I was going to be doing was storytelling and product. And that's what got me into it. It wasn't an exit plan, and it wasn't a point of view on like any strategic acquirers at all. That was just like, I love this and I'm going to do it. But even if you love it, and even if you are a founder that's so compelled, as I was, to just do something for storytelling, product, and fun, having a point of view on what might be the exit path is probably really good. Because unless you just want to run a lifestyle business is so, I think the phrase lifestyle business is sort of bandied about occasionally in like a, not derogatory, but like a slightly.
Yeah, I mean, like a dig. It is.
Yeah, it's like a dig. It's like, oh, you're going to run a cute little lifestyle business? I'm like, well, I don't know. If my business is consuming my life, maybe that's what it is.
I mean, a lifestyle business can just as easily be turned into a life-changing asset if you think about how you can work towards some form of exit. And the interesting thing, Sam, that I think about, you mentioned something that's really important, and this is separate from your actual story, but you said something important, which is that especially if you're bootstrapped, you need to think about exit. Here's the thing, like when a VC invests in you or anyone invests in you, they're investing in you with an expected return, right? They think eventually you'll exit and this will be the return. So that's like ingrained in you. But so many of us are bootstrapped for a variety of reasons. Either we want to, or we don't, are unsuccessful raising funds, or we're afraid to raise funds. And we don't think like that for ourselves, what the expected return will be. So you're so dead on about that about bootstrapped founders often don't think about exit. And you're right that they should. You're right.
Yeah, they really should. Just take it. I wish I had. And now I do, of course. Like I've founded, many other businesses I've always got. But I don't think that should cloud the wanting to be in the business either, right? Because you've got to expect that, like, even if there is a really clear exit path with like a revenue gate that if I get this business to 5 or 10 or 100 million, there will be a person on the other side who wants to acquire it. And I kind of have like a list of those people in mind. That might take a lot longer than expected, or there might be like wild other circumstances, like externalized factors that make it go faster or slower. And so, yes, have an exit in mind. Also, just love what you're doing. You must, because it is all consuming. And I think that there's a balance there to be had for both, where it's like, yes, I must love every day of what I mean, not every minute, but like broadly, the story arcs need to be joyful, because otherwise, what are you doing with your time? But then also like, where could it go? What might it be like, when I'm outside the business looking back?
Absolutely. Okay. Who comes to you for sale? How does this happen? How does the exit come to fruition? Let's go. Spill the tea.
So,
Let's stir it. Stir it with the spatula.
They were here. I was stirred up. There was a business called Gin Lane. They did like branding and marketing and digital execution in a spectacular way for some of the most celebrated direct-to-consumer brands of the kind of like mid-teens era. And that team said, you know what? We're kingmakers for product. Let's go do product. They started a few brands of their own. And then they said, okay, now let's kingmake for some other folks. Like, let's go buy some of our businesses. So that business was Pattern Brands. And when they started to make acquisitions or decide that was part of their, kind of strategic path, we were the first business, surely not their first phone call, but we were the first business that they acquired. And they've subsequently acquired several more.
Okay, so Gin Lane markets D2C brands. They're like, okay, now we're actually going to build brands. They form Pattern. Now they set out. They're making great money. So they say, okay, now we're going to acquire brands. And Pattern says, okay, we are interested in you. So they approach you. How does this happen?
So I have a lot of founder friends in New York. And one of them was like buddies with Emmett at Pattern. And she said, hey, like Pattern's starting to acquire. That was not like outside knowledge quite yet. I don't think, but I don't know. I wasn't in the loop really. It's just what I was introduced. So they're starting to make acquisitions. My friend introduces me directly to Emmett, who I had been such a fan of for so many years because he's prolific and creative and such a great, wonderful person. Now that he's a friend now. And so Z introduces me. Thank you, Z. Uprise Art. You need wonderful art in your...
Or love Uprise Art. Yes, I see. Do. Everyone go check out Uprise Art. It's awesome.
We got to pump her up. So Z introduces me to Emmett. Emmett and I get on the line. He's like, hey, have you thought about like acquisition? I'm like, I don't know. What's up?
Yeah.
I'm just operating here. So my husband, my business partner, and also my best friend is like business partner, chief of staff, and they're like, Sam, sell it. And I'm like, what am I going to be? Extra this, like I had so many feelings about it. But that conversation really, we meshed really well with the pattern team. They were so good at the things that were really more soft spots for me, at least at that time that I felt like they were soft spots, like performance marketing and digital advertising and all. I'm like, oh, I would have loved to work with these guys as an agency to help me do. And now they're going to own it and do it. Like, take it away, guys.
Like that was all of the stuff that you wouldn't do because you couldn't do because you were bootstrapped. So you went to wholesale. So like that makes complete sense. Did you use a broker or an advisor, or did you do this yourself? You did this.
Just did it ourselves. Yeah.
So how did you value the business? How did you make sure that the deal was good for both parties? How did you navigate through that?
I think so. Here's a phrase I learned.
Yeah.
Business concern versus legal concern.
Yep.
Because there's a bunch of lawyers involved, and they're going through the nitty gritty of contracts. We do a lot of our own legal. So we're sort of like chugging along, but with these like pretty high powered lawyers on the other side. We did have a lawyer, but he was not like purely an M&A lawyer. He was just like a guy who was on our side. So, we're really motivated by making sure that from a legal perspective, everyone was in alignment, because there were a lot of different elements to this particular acquisition, which I can go into a little bit of detail, but not like excruciating.
Yep.
On the record. But ultimately, it was our job to say, okay, like from a business perspective, what's important to us, and then like let the lawyers do the lawyer thing, and they'll figure out how to make the contracts executable and binding and all of these lawyer words that I don't really know because not a lawyer, but just like enforceable and durable over time, and proper and all of those things. And our job was really just more like very human. Like contracts are so sometimes intimidating for people, or there's a bunch of legalese wrapped around it. But if you're good at interpreting that language, I focused on poetry in college, so like I'm very good at interpreting weird mixes of words. Like extracting what the business understanding is from legal is like a thing that here's another thing that everyone should spend a little bit of time practicing. It's just like get away from the legal speak of it all and just understand what it means for your business in any contract.
You know what? It's very interesting you say that, because I liken reading legal contracts to transliterating Shakespeare. Because you said that about poetry. Like, it's like Shakespeare, you read, it's Old English. You have no idea what the heck it is. If you actually sit and read it and transliterate it into today's speak, you'll understand. So it's kind of the exact same thing. It takes time, but it's really important. It is really important to learn. I majored in Shakespeare.
And it was like that. So that made it very human with the pattern team to interact. I mean, we were just able to have conversations. You don't have to have that skill to be able to have the type of conversation. No one has to have.
You though, like with it, when you come to with the number to value this business, I would just it's amazing to me that you did this at a business of your size without any advisor. Did they come to you with a number? Did you come to them and say, this is the number I want? Like, how did the conversation start? And was there a lot of negotiating?
There was a bit of negotiating, but it was fast in an absolute perspective. I want to say that we started our very initial introductory conversation right before Thanksgiving.
Yeah.
And by the time June rolled around, the transaction was
amazing.
The valuation, again, just like a very human conversation.
Yeah.
Our particular transaction, because of the nature of our business, was broken up into a few different pieces that needed to be valued differently. And there's one example that I can share publicly, which is we were still selling PPE. This was like late 2020 when the conversation started, early 2021.
Yeah.
PPE sales were a big part of our business. Everybody knows that's going to go away. We were all very realistic about that expectation. So we're like, okay, we really have to carve out that chunk of revenue and value it differently and agree about it differently. And then there were two other parts of the business that we agreed to value differently from each other. And so, we were using some benchmarks in the market to make an overall agreement on the valuation and the cash size. Another big part of this, and trying to figure out what the right amount of detail to go into here is, but because I acquire businesses too now. So, I kind of,
we've got it.
Sides of it, which is very fortunate to be able to have this perspective.
I did too.
When a business is purchased, the purchaser is looking at what they can extract as future value.
Correct.
But they're also on a learning curve, right? They're trying to understand how your business works and what all the gears are that have to turn together to make what you say will happen in the future happen.
Sure.
And when a business like Pattern approaches a business like Gear with so much more funding and so much more capacity, frankly, that calculation is like, okay, well, we can't really look at what just happened over 3 years. We have to look at what you can do with all your money. So one of the first big kind of linchpins of our valuation was really our team saying, if we had sufficient capital to deploy, here's what our plan would be over the next 2 years. And without that capital, here's a different plan. So I basically had to write 2 different expectation plans for like what might happen for this business. In scenario A, I'm just doing my thing. Yeah. Scenario B, I'm doing my thing but with a lot of money. And like, here's what I recommend. So that was like the other funny thing about this that founders who are considering either starting or about to go through an acquisition exploration or some sort of process is that the job of, it's like looking for a job, right? Like it's hard to look for a job while you're in a job because it's a full-time job to look for a job. It's a full-time job to sell a company. But you have to run the company at the same time because you have to transfer the company in good health. You can't just like let it go, by the wayside while you're having this other big transaction conversation. So some of the hardest I've ever worked in my life was making sure that this business was like healthy and on trend without overextending our balance sheet, because I'm like, well, it's not going to be ours in a second. So I can't take risks in this moment.
You have to actually protect all margin. You have to, yes, during that.
And I'm a risk taker in many ways, not with marketing, but with everything else, like with product plans and stuff. We were always going on new product. I mean, we were in tooling for products that weren't even, we're about to go into the market through that acquisition timeframe. I'm like, should I sit on the tooling because I think maybe they won't want this product, or because I want this product, maybe that's just what's good for the brand because I know it's good for the brand. And all of these little calculations going on about like maintaining while projecting 2 different scenarios while transacting. And that is really hard. But the most direct answer to your question is like, jobs to be done, make a plan. Make that plan, make 2 plans.
Right. If you had capital and if you didn't. Yes. What it would look like, and trying to valued on the one bet if you had capital.
And again, without saying anything that I shouldn't share publicly, one of our specialties, one of the things that really made the Gear engine chug under my watch was new product introductions. Like that's my real core sweet spot. If there's one thing I can do with my eyes closed, it's like build a product strategy, execute against it, and go to market over and over and over again. Like that zone that's my zone of genius. And that's true for digital products and it's true for hardware and physical products. So that's what I was doing. That was my leadership. And because that was my capacity and all of the things that they brought to the table were things I didn't have, so different. I think that was an interesting transition for the business to go through to say, well, the engine that drove our growth was really like pressing on wholesale and pressing on new product introductions on a very regular cadence. New guard is we're going to grow through performance marketing and maintain the product catalog as it is. And yes, grow wholesale, but I think maybe with a slightly less desperate perspective than we had. And so when I wrote my marketing plans, it was sort of like for the world that I knew and what I would have done literally. And I don't know how executable any of that was, but it certainly had an impact on the valuation, because I said, well, if I do these things, if I launch these new products, here's how much we're going to sell.
Perfect. That is such a great tip. Okay, Sam, I love this entire story. I have one final question for you that's very interesting. You said something earlier about how your husband and your best friend were like, well, sell it. And you kind of laughed and you were like, well, what will I do? So kind of my head, it's like your density when you have this type of business. And so you sell and then you're eventually moving on. Like, how did you find your way for what's next? And was it harder than you anticipated?
It was so hard. So hard. I don't think it should have been. I think I took it a little personally, but it was hard. I spent 10 years building an aura of this exact person doing this exact thing. And my public persona, to the extent that it infused into my my true personhood, was like very much associated with being this plucky little kid that was doing kitchenwares. And so I did a couple things in emotional self-defense. Yes. I kept our team. Like, these kids are rad. Let's keep working together. What can we do? So I kept most of our team. And Pattern took a couple people on board to their side. But I was really motivated by people, and I didn't want this kind of win for me to be a loss for anyone else. That was like again, I don't know that that's the most quantitative or intellectual driver, or that I should have made it a linchpin in the whole thing. That certainly wouldn't have been the right business decision. But somehow for me, it was really important that, like, if I'm winning, everyone else needs to win. And it was not $100 million business. It wasn't fire money. I felt like everybody go to Cabo. It's just, well, guess what? You come tomorrow to work. Lark, you suck. So I built this agency I almost inherited our agency, like built it from underneath what we had. We were already doing private label product design, contract manufacturing, and 3PL. And those are the three things that Manifest did and does as a business. So we just wrapped an unpronounceable brand. I can explain. And the team kept going, and we thought, okay, this is going to be lossy for a second, but like, we'll build an agency here. Yeah. And so we did. And that gave me something to do and kept my friends around me. And again, I think maybe a little bit of an emotional clutch to have all of those people that I dearly loved and that had been so much a part of the first build around for the second build, and now the third and the fourth. So that was one piece of it. I don't think it totally resolved my entire identity crisis, but it definitely gave me something to do the next day, and I'm pretty active. So me being on the beach is a little bit more stressful than unless I'm surfing, unless I'm doing something hard at the beach. Yeah, I kind of need a project. I wish I had taken a minute, though. I think to the extent that I can sort of extract from this a little bit of perspective or advice for others. Like, I don't know, building businesses is hard, and I built another hard to build business. And yeah, we had some immediate traction because we were already had a few customers, and the 3PL was a critical piece of extended operations for gear and working with the Pattern team on keeping that alive. But I didn't take a break, and I should have. I should have taken 2 weeks. Yeah. I didn't take a 2-week vacation. I mean, I didn't take a month. I didn't take, and I wish I had. Yeah. I think I might have developed more perspective through that time, or been more like tactical about the next business build. Maybe thought about the exit a little bit more carefully, because Manifest has its own. And maybe this is another podcast, like not the exit, but like the path. Manifest was a few business models in one, and that's not acquirable for reasons as an acquirer that I could explain. But ultimately, for us to really build those businesses to scale, we've needed to extract them from each other. We were building a software platform within Manifest. It needs venture capital.
It has to be its own.
It can't be entangled with a service business. And I didn't know that at the time. So take a break, take a breath. And if you're a founder who's considering exiting right now, as in like 2024, 2025 space, if you are so privileged to exit at a level that really allows you to take a few months off, I would learn for a minute, because the way that we work is fundamentally changing. And I'm going back to school for it while I'm at my day job to just sort of understand like everything that's going on in software development, and also like product communications, and the way that we build is being deeply influenced by AI, but it's not resolved yet. We can't just say, hey, AI is here and it's going to solve everything.
That's right.
If I had the perspective that I had today, or if I was a founder considering an exit today and stepped back and said, what am I going to do with my next year? Learn for a minute. Learn how to work with some of these new tools, get smart on them, because I am almost positive it will change your outlook on what you build next. And it has changed mine, but I'm like I'm like mid stride.
Sam, I had I had the exact same experience. So I think we're not alone. I think founders have a very hard time sort of sitting in the silence and saying like, okay, I'm not going to produce right now. I'm just going to sit and learn and take the beat. And I agree with you. I have the same experience that if I think literally the day I left my acquirer, the next day I launched. I mean, I really didn't take a beat. And so it's very similar. And I think it's in the DNA of founders. But I agree with you that if you can take that time to reflect and to learn, such a good insight to learn, it is truly a game changer. Sam, I'm so happy to have you on. I'm so grateful. You are a light and a wonderful, wonderful story. Thank you for sharing so transparently and openly with us on The Exit Whisperer.
Thank you so much. I love this podcast. And very happy to be able to share. This is the new one I learned from my kids. Let me see. This is a tiny heart. I'm not really doing it. Yeah, I see it. Yeah, yep, we did it. Thank you for having me. It's been a pleasure. I hope I can return the favor, and I hope that provided some value to your listeners today.